In this episode, we talk about communal tensions over sexual exploitation in a town in Rajasthan. We also talk about the complexities of the US visa process for a grieving father. But first, we talk about resolutions put forward on the third anniversary of the Russia-Ukraine war. Hi, I'm Ichha Sharma, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine has been consistently continuing since the last 3 years. The war started on 24th of February 2022 when Russian troops invaded Ukraine in the Donbas area. Since then, both sides have suffered massive losses.
The fighting has gone non-stop. The early stages, it was pretty brutal. But then there's been a war of attrition from both sides. Both sides have, suffered a lot of casualties. Russian tanks have been damaged, but on one side, Russian troops have been killed. But on the Ukrainian side also, there have been damages on civilian infrastructure, military infrastructure. There are critical infrastructure that has been targeted, and also a lot of lives have been lost on the Ukrainian side as well. And a lot of people have been displaced because of the constant shelling by the Russian side on Ukrainian cities and towns. And there's been the Bucha massacre, where a lot of innocent civilians were killed.
That's the Indian Express's diplomatic affairs editor, Shubhajit Roy. Currently, 20% of Ukraine is under Russian control. Since 2022, there have been multiple resolutions put forth to bring the conflict to a halt. This year, on the third anniversary of the war between the two nations, Ukraine presented a resolution demanding Russia's withdrawal from its territory, de-escalation and early cessation of hostilities, and a peaceful resolution of the war against Ukraine, and a comprehensive, lasting and just peace. In this segment, my colleague Niharika Nanda talks to Shubhajit, who shares details of the deliberations that happened and the impact that US President Donald Trump has had on the situation.
Shubhajit, to begin with, can you talk about the efforts that have been made towards bringing the war to an end in the last 3 years?
Every year at the anniversary, in the first year, obviously, in 2022, there have been several resolutions, UN resolutions at the UN General Assembly, at the UN Security Council, at different UN organizations from WHO to Human Rights Council to UNESCO to, WTO. Everywhere there were resolutions that were put forward to corner Russia by the Europeans and the Americans, to sort of call out this aggression that was mounted by Russian troops against Ukraine. And then thereafter, it sort of lessened, petered out a bit. But every year in the anniversary of the war, so 24th of February, essentially, of 2023, 2024, and again this year, there have been resolutions at the UN. And that sort of tells you the barometer or the political mood in the world. I mean, how many countries are sort of favoring a ceasefire or favoring a stop to the war? So that has been usually the anniversary, marking the anniversary that has taken place at the United Nations.
Right. But how have things changed since US President Donald Trump came to power?
This year, interestingly, after US President Donald Trump has assumed office in White House in January this year, it has obviously now gone ahead and effected a U-turn in their policies towards Ukraine and Russia. And they have now reached out to Russia in direct talks to end the war. So US President Donald Trump had a 90-minute phone conversation some days ago, about a couple of weeks ago, with Russian President Putin. That was the first time a sitting US president had a conversation with the Russian president after the war started 3 years ago. And this was followed by direct talks between US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and NSA Mike Waltz with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and some senior Russian officials and leaders in Saudi Arabia. So they met in Riyadh and they held direct talks there, where obviously both Ukraine was not present, firstly, which is the victim of this war, and secondly, Europe, which has been the other stakeholder in this war, because Europe has been impacted most with this war because of the Russian aggression. So both were not present. And in that backdrop, on when the third anniversary resolution at the UN came up, so US sort of suffered setbacks on two occasions with its European allies at the UNGA, but then it sort of managed to prevail at the Security Council on the same day. So it was a day of high drama where the transatlantic partnership that is now already facing an existential threat from this US policy reversal under President Trump has appeared to have frayed further.
Now, Shubhajit, coming to the resolutions, can you talk about the one that was put forward by Ukraine recently and the response that it received?
The first resolution was moved by Ukraine, which introduced a 3-page resolution demanding Russia's withdrawal from its territory, calling for de-escalation and early cessation of hostilities and a peaceful resolution of the war against Ukraine, as well as a comprehensive, lasting and just peace. So this was the language of the resolution. The US also brought its own 3-paragraph resolution seeking a swift end to the conflict and a lasting peace between Ukraine and Russia, but it did not condemn Russia's aggression. In fact, just to give context, earlier this month, Trump accused President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine of starting the war, which is like a bizarre, false claim because it's clear that it was the Russian tanks that rolled into Ukraine to start the war. And then, so what happened was Ukraine's resolution was passed 93-18. So 93 countries voted in favor of the resolution and 18 voted against, which included US and Russia. And 65 countries abstained. The group of 7, the G7 countries, barring the US, voted with the Ukrainians. And the US, Russia, and Israel voted against. China, which is Russia's close ally since the war began, they abstained.
And what about the US? It had also presented a resolution regarding the US and Russia war. How was that different from the one that was put forward by Ukraine, and what kind of a response did it receive?
When the US resolution was taken up, France proposed amendments saying the conflict was a result of a full-scale invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation. After the amendments were incorporated, the US abstained on its own resolution, which passed 93-8 with 73 abstentions. So 93 voted in favor and 8 against and 73 abstained. Now, resolution similar to the original US draft was then moved in the 15-member UN Security Council. So the previous two resolutions were moved with the UN General Assembly, which has all the 193 countries as members. But at the UN Security Council, as you know, there are only 15 members, 5 permanent members and 10 non-permanent members, which keep rotating. So resolution similar to the original US draft was then moved in the 15-member UN Security Council, where Russia vetoed the European amendments. And this resolution was passed 10-0, with France and UK among the 5 abstentions. So this was the sort of state of play at the UN on Monday. And it was sort of a day of dramatic developments where for the first time the US voted in favor of Russia.
And talking about that, US voting in favor of Russia, what significance does that hold, especially keeping in mind the history that the two nations have had, which once used to be the US and the Soviet Union?
Yeah, so that's the story of this particular last 30 days, or last couple of weeks rather, that things have changed. So essentially the Cold War, as you mentioned, the two countries, US and Soviet Union, were the superpowers of the day. There was a Cold War from 45 to 1991. When Soviet Union collapsed, the US, there was a unipolar moment. Soviet Union collapsed into several countries. Russia was sort of seen as the inheritor of the legacy of Soviet Union. So now what happened was for 3 years, the Americans really helped in the war effort. They supplied arms and ammunition and training and drones and, funding. Now with Trump coming to power in the White House, US has changed its position. and has said that it cannot provide that security, provide wartime effort, contribute to the Ukrainian war effort. So they are now Trump has said that he wants to end the war, and he is talking directly with President Putin to end the war. So that is where the US sort of pivoted or changed its position under Trump, and is now seems to be in a hurry to end the war through negotiations with Russia, but decidedly take a decision in favor of Russia.
And how was this change received by the Ukrainian diplomats?
So what Europeans feel and Ukrainians also feel that, this is sort of satisfying the aggressor. And they say that, does that mean that Russia gets to keep the 20% of the territory that it controls? And if that happens, that means that they are rewarding or incentivizing the aggressor in the modern times, which was like post 45. The New World Order, the idea was that the territorial integrity of neighboring countries or countries would be respected.
And now, Shubhajit, coming to India, what has been India's stance in the conflict and how was it represented?
Well, India has said 2-3 things. First is that it favors dialogue and diplomacy to end the war, which has been its stated position. It has not taken sides. It has always abstained on these resolutions. And it has said that it is ready to play a constructive role, a role in ending the war. So that has been also construed as can India play a mediator role and all of that. That has also been discussed. But India has tried to maintain a neutral role, and Prime Minister Modi, he famously said that this is not the era of war to President Putin, and then he also said that solutions can't be found on the battlefield. But beyond these statements, he has also had, phone calls and meetings and visits to both Moscow and Kyiv to meet Putin as well as Zelensky. And he has sort of tried to convey that, India is on the side of peace. That has been his sort of line. And so it has tried to maintain that equidistance from both sides in this war.
And there was this significant change in India's take on this whole situation, as you also mentioned in your story, that India has nuanced its framing of the war slightly, moving from two parties to the conflict to broader parties concerned. What significance does that change hold?
Well, when last year in 2024, when India attended the peace conference in Switzerland, at that point of time, it made a statement there that, it would want a sincere and practical engagement between the two parties to the conflict, essentially meaning Russia and Ukraine. But it also added that we'll continue to engage with all stakeholders meaning US, Europe, China, and whoever is you can think are the stakeholders. But it clearly mentioned two parties to the conflict. Now, moving away from that, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, when he made his statement at the G20 Foreign Ministers meeting last week in South Africa, he did not explicitly mention this term, two parties to the conflict. Instead, he said that today the world expects that parties concerned deal with each other to end the war. So essentially, he was moving away from the fact that there are two parties, Russia and Ukraine, and now talking about parties concerned. So concerned parties would mean, it could mean US, Russia, it could mean US, Ukraine, Russia, it could mean US, Ukraine, Russia, Europe. But so he left it vague. But the point that I'm trying to make is this nuancing was essentially in the backdrop of the direct talks between US and Russia, with Ukraine not being at the table and also Europe obviously not being at the table.
And Shubhajit, after all of this, where do we stand vis-a-vis the end of the war? Do these resolutions foreshadow what is to come?
Well, the fighting on the battlefront is still on, and that has not stopped. But these diplomatic negotiations have picked up pace, and while President Trump has reached out to President Putin, and there have been direct talks between senior ministers and officials. In the meantime, Trump has also spoken to Zelensky, but he's also insulted him, called him a dictator. And now Trump is also meeting Zelensky, and they're talking about the critical minerals deal. So I think there is a sense of hurry in American president's mind to end the war, and he wants to end the war by Easter. That's what he has set the timeline, broad timeline. We'll have to see how negotiations play out and what do Ukrainians want and what do Ukrainians say. And the country has suffered a lot. And India, China, Europe, everyone is watching on how these negotiations to end the war unfold and end.
And next, we talk about the complexities of a sexual exploitation case in Rajasthan's Bijainagar town. A small town in Rajasthan has become the epicenter of communal unrest following allegations of sexual exploitation involving minor girls. What started as a case of missing money escalated into multiple FIRs accusing Muslim youths of blackmail, forced relationships, and conversion attempts. Within days, 11 arrests were made, protests erupted, and local authorities served encroachment notices to a mosque. The case has drawn sharp reactions from political leaders and right-wing organizations, with Rajasthan Governor Haribhau Bagde making contemptuous remarks, urging Hindus to look them straight in the eye and reply to a brick with a stone. As security tightens, families of both the victims and the accused live in fear. Some allege political motives behind the crackdown, while others see it as a long overdue justice. In this segment, the Indian Express's Parul Khulshrestha breaks down the complexities of this case, like what triggered the unrest and how authorities are handling the investigation. Parul, could you start by telling us the significance of this town, Bijainagar, and a little about its demographics?
There are around 6,000 voters of Muslims in the town, and I think 90% of the population is Hindu. Amongst them, predominantly, the businesses are owned by the Vaishya community or the Jain community. So that is there, and it is situated like in the middle of the prime locations of the state. Ajmer is very near, Jaipur is 3 hours away, Pawar is very near, Bhilwara is very near. So the economy of the town is very flourishing, and businessmen actually make a good living in the town. And a lot of them also have offices in Mumbai and Kolkata and all. So that has been the demography of the town, and majority of the Muslim who are liberal community are dependent on the Hindu community.
Right. Also, what are these key allegations of sexual exploitation that have caused an unrest in the town?
So it has been going on for a while that a few guys from minority, that is Muslim community, have sexually exploited and blackmailed few minor Hindu girls, and they were trying to manipulate them to convert to other religion. So those were the allegations that were surfaced on 16-17 February this year. And since that has been going on, around 11 people have been arrested in this regard, out of which 3 were minor. And so this has been a very burning issue in the area that has created a lot of communal tensions.
Also, as you mentioned that this has been going on for a few days now, what has been the response from local residents and also authorities to these allegations?
So I talked to the deputy superintendent of police of that area. He told me that he had arrested 11 people, and a lot of people are on their list who are suspected to be involved in this. What he told me that the allegations from the victim side were that the men have made their videos and they were blackmailing them to continue the relationship even if they wanted to break it off. But the police said that there have been no evidence, or if they have not found any kind of photograph or videos in the phone of men till now. And so they have given the phone to the FSL team from Jaipur. They are investigating. The medical report of the victims is also pending. Till that time, police is investigating. The forensic team from Jaipur and medical team from Ajmer and the Child Rights Commission has also arrived, and they are taking progress in the report. That is all going on right now, the routine medical stuff, and the investigation is under process. The locals, in a way, the town is very small, but it is surrounded by a lot of good areas. Like Bhilwara district is just 69 kilometers from Bijainagar. Pawar is near Ajmer, is also around 60-70 kilometers. So in that way, it has always been a hub of businessmen, and a lot of Vaishya community people also reside in that town. And majority of the business is owned by the Hindus, and the workers who are employed by the Hindus are Muslims. So they are all are dependent on each other. So it has created some shock wave in the town, and the situation is difficult and tensed in that area, to be honest. And but a lot of these rallies that have been taken out by the right wing groups are consisting of people who are not from the town but from outside the town. So that has been going on. That communal tension is still there in the city and the town that you can feel when you enter there.
And Parul, could you also talk about how did the state government respond to these allegations?
So, state government, actually, the governor of Rajasthan has commented on this that the girls were targeted because they are Hindus. And he said that this will not work in Rajasthan and in India. The times have changed now and we are Hindus and all. And a lot of BJP leaders have commented, the local MLAs have visited the area and all. Nobody has taken up the issue to the Rajasthan State Assembly that is going on right now. But yeah, since the state government is BJP, which is pro-Hindus, the issue is quite burning in the area.
And as you mentioned, that there has been a lot of attention on this case lately. So could you tell us what specific actions have been taken in the investigation so far?
So the main suspects who are involved, among which 3 are minor men from the Muslim community, are being detained. And there is also said to be one councillor of the local municipality who is alleged to be the mastermind of this case. He is also under arrest. And the 3 accused has been sent for judicial remand. There are also some people, like there was one guy who had lent his motorcycle to one of his friend, who is also one of the prime suspect in this case. He was arrested for conspiring in this case. There were a lot of people who had someone has purchased the mobile phone for his friend to give to the girls. He was also arrested. So anyone who is remotely connected to this case is arrested by the police and they are under custody and the investigation is ongoing.
Right. And also, have there been any protests or demonstrations related to this issue?
So the protest has been going on for a long time in Bijainagar since this case was highlighted. The VHP had taken out rally in the entire city, especially in the Muslim-dominated areas of the town, and they had actually, whatever the locals told me, that they took out a rally in front of the biggest mosque of the town, which is Jama Masjid. They had started, saying provocative slogans towards the Muslim community, and there have been a lot of communities apart from VHP who has taken out rallies, including Jain Samaj, Sindhi Samaj, Saini Samaj. They all have come up in support of this case and the women of the town. So this is what is happening right now.
And also, Parul, as you mentioned, the governor has also spoken in regard to the situation. But are there any other political leaders who have made statements?
Yeah, this has been going on. A lot of other political leaders have also commented on this. Governor, including the BJP MLAs of that area, because that is a BJP dominated seat. Masuda and Bhilwara is very nearby. So this area has always been very tense. So those local areas and local MLAs have come forward and taken stock of what is going on in that area.
Also, as you previously noted, that anyone who is remotely involved in the case is arrested. And you also spoke with the families concerned in the case. So what did they have to say about these allegations and the case in general?
So what happened, I speak to the families of the accused and the victims, both the sides. And the victims' family members said that their girls, they discovered this, what was going on, when around 2,000 rupees were missing from the father's wallet. And then they got to know that one of the daughters have a small Chinese phone. And then they dialed the number and they got to know that she was talking to this guy. And after some kind of, a threat from the parents, the girl confessed that she has been facing this situation. And the guy, as the girls alleged, has exploited them sexually and he is harassing them to maintain the relationship with them. So after that, the complaint was filed and it all came into the light. The guy's family members alleged that both the sides were minors. And because they both live in the same locality. So it was like of a teenage affair that was going on. And one of the men's uncle commented that he had received a call from one of the girls' uncle or one of the girls' relative that both the girl and boy are talking for a while and they wanted to put an end to it because they belong to different communities. So he scolded his nephew to stop talking to that girl. But after that, this thing was highlighted and his nephew was arrested. So he said that it was consensual and both of them were minor and the girl was talking not because of any force used upon them, but because of her own will. This is what the boy's family member has alleged. So this is what both the sides are. The boy's family members are now worried about their future, who will give them job and all. And anyways, they belong to labor class community. The girl's family member also belong to a labor class community, but they are more worried about their daughter's future, who is going to marry them, and what is the mental state of their daughters.
And lastly, Parul, as we just spoke, youths from both communities have been involved in this case. So what has been the impact of the controversy on the youth's safety concerns in the region?
The Muslim community told me that after this incident came to light, the rallies started, a lot of people were threatened by the right-wing organizations. There was one girl whose brother was arrested in this case, who was alone at her home that night on February 18th, and around 10 to 15 bikers barged into her home and they started threatening her, and she was all alone. Her parents were not there at that time. So she had to beg in front of them to leave her alone because the parents are not there and they can come back when the parents arrive. But they start threatening her and hurling, abuses and all. So the parents have stopped going to the market and all. They're not getting out of their houses. And even the brothers of the accused and the family members, they're very cautious and, stepping out of their house. Especially the initial days of this, when the incident was highlighted from 16 to 20 February, the parents stopped sending their kids to school. They stopped interacting in the local market or anything because they were scared of their safety. Even not just the parents of the accused or family members of the accused. Every Muslim family of that area stopped sending their children to school. So that has been happening and they are very scared of their security.
And in the end, we talk about a case that has ignited discussions on the inefficiencies of visa policies in times of crisis. In a tragic turn of events, 35-year-old Indian student Neelam Shinde, studying in California, was left in a coma following a devastating road accident on 14th of February. As she lay unconscious in a hospital, thousands of miles away in Maharashtra's Satara district, her father embarked on a desperate battle, not against time, but against a wall of red tape, to obtain an emergency visa and be by her side. For over 10 days, Neelam's father struggled with the complexities of the US visa process, navigating layers of bureaucracy. The family only learnt about the accident 2 days later through her roommates, and their attempts to secure an expedited visa were met with delays. Despite the urgency of the situation, paperwork and formalities stood in the way. As the news spread, political leaders and government officials stepped in, amplifying the family's plea. Supriya Sule, an NCP MP, publicly appealed to the Ministry of External Affairs and US authorities, urging immediate intervention. Union Minister Muralidhar Mohol also pressed for expedited processing, and diplomatic efforts were launched to push the case forward. Finally, after 10 agonizing days, the US consulate in Mumbai granted Neelam's father an emergency visa appointment, offering a glimmer of hope amid the chaos. The ordeal, however, didn't end here. Given his own health issues, Neelam's father debated whether he could travel alone. The family considered sending a cousin, an IT professional with a valid passport, to accompany him. Neelam, a dedicated scholar in the final year of her master's program, was on the brink of fulfilling her academic aspirations. Her father, already grieving the loss of his wife, had placed his dreams in his daughter's future. The emotional and logistical challenges they faced underscored the cold reality of immigration bureaucracy, where even medical emergencies are subjected to layers of scrutiny and delays. You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by Niharika, Nanda and me, Ichha Sharma. If you like the show, do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend it to someone you think may like it, with a friend or in your family. This is the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio or write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.